My name is Lauren Hart, and I live in a blue craftsman home on Queen and Hill in Seattle, Washington. The house has white-trimmed windows, a brick path that remains slick with rain for most of the year, and a small lemon tree that does its best to survive the Pacific Northwest drizzle. I bought it after 10 years of running my own marketing firm in Belltown, starting with nothing but a laptop and a rented desk in a co-working space. The day I signed the closing papers, I told myself it was proof that all my long nights and quiet sacrifices had been worth it. What I didn't realize then was that I had been funding more than just my own life. I had been keeping my entire family afloat. It started innocently. My parents were always proud, but quiet about their finances. When my father's health began to falter and my mother's hours at the library were cut, I sent them small checks, $300 here, $500 there. My older brother, Daniel, was charming and ambitious, but allergic to stability. When he lost his job in Portland, I wired him $4,800 to cover rent. When he needed a deposit for an apartment in Chicago, I paid that too. When Dad's medical bills hit $2,300 one month, I paid them without question. I told myself this was love, that this was what family did for each other. Over time, those little helps became expectations. When a bill arrived, my phone would ring. When Daniel's credit card maxed out, I'd get a text. "Hey sis, you're the organized one. Can you handle this for me until next month?" There was never a next month. I kept telling myself I didn't mind. I was the responsible one. The one who built something from nothing while everyone else drifted. Maybe that was my purpose, to keep the family stable while they figured life out. Then came the dinner that changed everything. It was a rainy Friday in March when we met at Shoreline House, a waterfront restaurant overlooking Elliott Bay. The night was supposed to celebrate my firm's biggest milestone yet, landing a London-based client with a retainer of £18,000 per month. I should have been excited. Instead, as soon as I walked in and saw Daniel laughing at the bar with my father, that familiar weight settled on my shoulders. I already knew how the night would end, with me quietly picking up the tab while everyone else ordered cocktails they couldn't afford. The restaurant glowed with amber light. I ordered halibut. Daniel ordered the most expensive steak on the menu. My parents smiled the way people do when they're proud but detached, as if my success were a movie they were only half watching. For most of the evening, I stayed quiet, sipping my wine and pretending everything was fine. Then dessert came. Daniel, drunk on whiskey and attention, raised his glass and said loudly, "A toast to my little sister, our family's financial genius. Without her, half of us would be bankrupt." The table laughed. I didn't. He grinned, leaning back in his chair. "Seriously, though, Lauren's like our private bank. I mean, she doesn't like attention, but hey, she's not built for the spotlight anyway." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel, it was worse. It was casual. Something inside me snapped. I felt the sting in my throat, but not from tears. From fire. For years, I had smiled through their comments, played the peacekeeper, told myself I could handle being the invisible helper. But not that night. I reached into my bag and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were neatly printed sheets, spreadsheets, wire receipts, and bank statements. My hands didn't shake when I opened it. "Let's talk about what I've actually done for this family," I said, my voice calm but cutting through the laughter like glass. 18 transfers to Daniel in the last year, $21, $750 total. Groceries for mom and dad, $3, $260. The Tacoma hospital paid $2,300. Your December credit card minimums, Daniel, $140. Total, $28,450 in 12 months. The table went silent. Even the waiter paused mid-step. Daniel blinked at me, his mouth open like he couldn't decide whether to laugh again or defend himself. "Wow, you actually keep score, huh?" "No," I said quietly. "I keep records. Because someone has to." Mom's fork clinked against her plate. Dad rubbed the bridge of his nose. I didn't care. For the first time in years, I wasn't swallowing my anger. "I'm done," I said. "This was never supposed to be permanent. I've helped all I can, and it's time everyone starts taking responsibility." I'll pay for dinner because I invited you. But after tonight, there are no more transfers, no more loans, no more quiet rescues. Daniel leaned forward, red-faced. You think you're better than us because you make money? No, I said, standing. I think I've been worse because I made it too easy for everyone else not to try. The table stayed frozen as I signed the check and placed my card on top. Outside, the rain was heavy and cold, but stepping into it felt like walking into clean air after years of smoke. I didn't look back. By the time I reached my car, my phone buzzed, text from Daniel, then Mom, then Dad. None of them said thank you. All of them said some version of the same thing. We need to talk. But I didn't respond. Not yet. That night, I stood at my kitchen window and watched the streetlights flicker through the rain. My house, my one solid thing, felt like both a fortress and a confession. I realized I had built it not just to live in, but to prove I could stand on my own. And now, for the first time, I was going to see if my family could do the same. The spreadsheet still sat on the restaurant table, in Daniel's hand. It was the first time I had ever given them proof of what I'd carried. The first time I had drawn a line they couldn't cross. And deep down, I knew this wasn't the end of the story. It was just the night I finally stopped paying for everyone else's mistakes. The morning after that dinner, Seattle felt quieter than usual. Rain streaked the kitchen window, tapping softly against the glass while my coffee grew cold beside me. My lemon tree outside was trembling in the wind again, leaves bright against the gray sky. I sat at my table, staring at a blank page on a yellow legal pad. At the top, I wrote one sentence that felt heavier than anything I'd ever written. No secret rescues. That was my first rule. If anyone in my family needed help from now on, they would have to ask for it directly and in writing. No more quiet transfers. No more guilt-driven bailouts, disguised as love. I started with what I could control. I logged into my accounts and changed every password: bank, email, business, and brokerage. Then I called my bank to request a fraud review. The manager, a calm woman named Celia, said she'd flag my file for unauthorized inquiries and send me copies of anything suspicious. I thanked her, hung up, and tried to breathe. By noon, the first surprise landed in my inbox. 2 store credit cards from Oregon listed me as an authorized user. I didn't recognize either store. One was a furniture chain, the other a home improvement outlet. Combined balance, $5,480. My name and partial social security number were on both. Then came another email, this one from a credit union in Spokane. It thanked me for adding a linked savings account as overdraft protection to a checking account ending in numbers I didn't recognize. The overdraft transfers weren't huge, $120 here, $95 there, but they had occurred 10 times in 7 months. My stomach twisted. I printed everything, lined up the pages neatly on the legal pad, and began a list of every discrepancy. By 2 o'clock, I'd made 3 phone calls. The first was to Daniel. He didn't answer. I waited 5 minutes, then texted him a picture of the store card statements and wrote, "Did you add me to these accounts?" 3 disappeared, then appeared again. His reply came in parts, first a joke, then a defense, then a final sentence that stung. "I thought you wouldn't mind. You've always had my back." The second call was to Mom. She sounded cautious, like she already knew something was coming. "Your father and I only did what we had to," she said. "The mortgage was tight over the winter. Your father handled some transfers." "What transfers?" I asked. "The Spokane account," she said quietly. "We thought it would just be temporary." I closed my eyes. "You used my name?" There was silence on the other end. Then a shaky breath. "We meant to tell you." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. The betrayal didn't come like a knife. It came like a slow flood, soaking everything I'd built. I made my third call to a consumer lawyer downtown, Andrea Collins, whose voice over the phone was steady and clear. She scheduled me for the next morning. Then I booked an appointment with my therapist, Grace, and called my accountant, Oliver Reed, who had been handling my business taxes for years. "I want you to help me prepare a factual report," I told him. "No emotion, just the numbers." I'm holding a family meeting. Good, he said simply. Bring everything to me first. We'll organize it. That night, I could barely eat. I sat in bed with my laptop, scrolling through months of transactions, seeing patterns I'd ignored for years. Gas payments in Tacoma, when I hadn't been there. Small wire transfers to Daniel that I'd completely forgotten about. Quiet, constant withdrawals from my savings that had added up to more than $30,000. For a long time, I had believed love was measured by sacrifice. That belief had bought my brother's rent, my parents' groceries, and a mountain of silent resentment. Now it was time to stop believing. The next evening, I drove down to my parents' bungalow in Tacoma. The house looked the same as always, yellow paint, flower boxes, a sagging porch light, but I felt like a stranger walking in. Mom was in the kitchen making tea. Dad sat in his recliner, pretending to watch a muted football game. Daniel stood by the window, arms crossed. I placed a manila folder on the coffee table. "We need to talk," I said. Daniel sighed. "Lauren, you're blowing this out of proportion." I ignored him and spread the papers across the table. Printouts, highlighted notes, and copies of the bank emails. "These," I said, "are accounts opened under my name. This one's from Spokane. This one's from Oregon. I didn't sign for any of them." Dad rubbed his temples. "We were just trying to manage while your mother's hours got cut. We didn't think it would matter. We knew you could handle it." "That's exactly the problem," I said quietly. "You keep assuming I'll handle everything. But I can't, not anymore." Mom started crying. Daniel began pacing. "Okay," he said. "Maybe I messed up. But you don't have to make it this dramatic. I'll fix it, just give me a week." I shook my head. "No more promises. We're going to fix it together, with structure." I've asked Oliver to join us on a video call on Tuesday to go over the numbers. Andrea will explain what's legal and what isn't. We're documenting everything. Daniel laughed bitterly. "You're acting like this is court." "This is accountability," I replied. "If I don't do this now, none of us will ever move forward." No one said a word. The muted TV flickered, showing a touchdown neither of my parents celebrated. I stood there, steady but hollow. "I'm not cutting you off," I said finally. "I'm setting boundaries. There's a difference." When I left, the air outside was sharp and cold. The sky over Puget Sound had turned silver gray, the color of endings. I stood by my car for a long moment, feeling both sick and strangely calm. As I drove home, headlights blurred across the wet road. I realized I wasn't angry anymore. Anger had burned itself out, leaving something stronger behind: resolve. For years, I'd believed I was keeping the family safe by carrying their weight. But real safety doesn't come from one person holding everyone else up. It comes from each person standing on their own. That night, back in my quiet blue house on Queen and Hill, I lit a candle on the kitchen counter and watched the flame bend in the draft. My phone buzzed with a new text from Daniel, just one line. "You're really going to make us do this formal thing?" I typed back 3 words. "Yes." For once. And as I set the phone down, I felt something shift. Not in them, but in me. A boundary drawn. A line held. And for the first time in my life, that felt like love too. On Tuesday morning, the air in Seattle felt still and heavy, as if the entire city were waiting for something to happen. I'd barely slept. The night before, I had stacked every document, printout, and receipt into a neat binder labeled Family Accounts, Audit. The title sounded sterile, but it was the first time I'd treated my family's financial chaos like what it really was, a set of problems that needed structure, not emotion. We met at my house because the internet connection was strong and because I wanted to be in my own space. Control, even in small doses, helps when everything else feels unpredictable. My dining table, a wide oak slab I'd bought from a craftsman in Oregon, was big enough to hold all our problems. Mom and Dad arrived first, both quiet. Dad's eyes darted to the papers spread across the table, then to the chairs. He took the one closest to the window, the same spot he always chose when he wanted to avoid the center of attention. Mom busied herself with the lemon tea I'd set out, hands trembling just enough to make the cups rattle. Daniel came last, wearing that half-casual, half-defensive grin that had gotten him through life. Andrea Collins, the consumer lawyer I'd hired, sat at the end of the table with her leather-bound notebook. Her tone was calm but firm, exactly what we needed. On her left, Oliver Reed, my accountant, joined the meeting via video call from his Ballard office. His voice came through steady, practical, stripped of judgment. And next to me sat Grace, my therapist, there not as a fixer, but as a witness. Andrea began. We're here to set the record straight, financially, legally, and personally. This is not about punishment. It's about clarity. The room went silent. She walked us through each issue one by one. First, the Oregon store cards. Both have been opened by Daniel, using my name as an authorized user. These accounts can be reassigned, Andrea explained. Daniel, you'll contact both institutions today. They'll remove her name and reissue balances under yours. Daniel nodded, staring at the table. I didn't mean. It doesn't matter what you meant, Andrea said gently. It matters what we correct. Next came the Spokane overdraft link, the one my parents had set up without telling me. Andrea pulled out a form from the bank that required written authorization for third-party linkages. This needs to be addressed. If Lauren didn't sign it, the bank failed its verification process. We'll request closure and a formal apology. Mom's eyes filled. We didn't think it was wrong, she whispered. We just thought we'd replace the money, before she noticed. Dad added, we were scared, Lauren. The mortgage was falling behind. I didn't want to lose the house. I nodded slowly. I understand why. But using my name without asking, it crossed a line. Oliver took over from there, explaining a plan he'd built with simple columns, dates, and dollar amounts. His screen shared the spreadsheet, clean and color-coded. We're going to start fresh, he said. Each of you has a financial path forward. He went down the list methodically. 1. The second car, a silver sedan barely driven, would be sold. Estimated value, $7,500. 2. The lake timeshare, and used for years, would be listed and sold, even if it only covered back dues. 3. The house, which had drained their savings, would be rented out and replaced by a smaller 2-bedroom near Mom's job at the library. Monthly savings, roughly $900. 4. Daniel would secure full-time work within 6 weeks. Freelance flexibility wasn't working anymore. 5. He would repay me $600 per month, tracked through labeled transfers marked Repay Heart. No guilt. No grace period. Just math. Mom nodded through tears. Dad stared out the window. Daniel shifted in his chair, but said nothing. Finally, Andrea slid a set of printed pages across the table. This, she said, is the family agreement. It wasn't dramatic. It was legal. It stated that no one could open a credit account in my name or use my information for any financial account. Any help I offer must be formalized in writing, with a start and end date. It required shared responsibility. Therapy sessions twice a month for 3 months, reviewed every quarter with Oliver. Everyone would sign it. We read it silently. Then, one by one, pens clicked and signatures filled the bottom lines. There were no speeches, no apologies. Just the sound of paper sliding across wood. When Daniel handed me the pen last, his hand shook slightly. I'll do it, he said. This time for real. I believe you, I said. But belief isn't enough anymore. Proof will do. He gave a small, almost grateful nod. By the end of the day, the agreement was scanned, notarized, and saved. The lawyer left first, then my parents. Daniel lingered by the door, as if unsure how to leave. I didn't mean to take advantage, he said quietly. I know, I replied. But you did. And now we fix it. When the house finally emptied, I stood in the silence, feeling both heavy and light. I walked through each room like I was meeting it again for the first time. The bay window in the front room glowed with the last light of the afternoon. The lemon bowl on the kitchen counter looked brighter than usual. My office smelled faintly of cedar and ink, the map of client cities framed above my desk like proof of how far I'd come. I thought about London, the retainer that had seemed like the pinnacle of success. That money once represented victory. Now it represented something else. Stability, the kind that allowed me to rebuild the part of my life I'd spent rescuing others. 2 weeks later, things began to shift. The second car sold for $7,400, and I helped Dad list the lake timeshare. Daniel accepted a position with a logistics company in Soto, starting at $58,000 a year. The first repayment transfer arrived in my account labeled Repay Heart, month 1. The note attached was simple, paying it back. It wasn't a miracle. It was a start. For the first time in years, I wasn't the family's silent bank. I was something far more difficult. It's a mirror. And in that reflection, we were all beginning to see who we'd really been. Spring arrived in Seattle quietly, the way it always does. Soft light, mist on the windows, the scent of wet earth drifting through cracked open doors. I had started answering messages from my family only on Sundays. It was the rhythm my therapist, Grace, and I had agreed on. Predictable contact meant peace. I didn't flinch when my phone buzzed anymore. I didn't carry guilt in my chest like a second heartbeat. Every Thursday at noon, I met Grace in her office near Green Lake. We talked about my old habits, how I mistook control for care, how I believed fixing everything was love. Rescue is not the same as connection, she once said, and those words stuck like glue in my mind. I learned to sit with discomfort, to let silence exist without rushing to fill it. It wasn't easy, but neither was rebuilding a life on solid ground. Family therapy began that April in a small room with beige chairs and the faint smell of peppermint tea. The first session was chaos disguised as politeness. Daniel cracked jokes to lighten the air, Mom apologized before every sentence, and Dad stared at the floor, his hands folded like he was praying for it to end. I didn't expect breakthroughs. I only wanted honesty. By the third session, something shifted. Daniel stopped deflecting. Mom admitted she'd always feared losing face more than losing trust. Dad, quiet as always, finally said, "I should have asked you for help instead of assuming you'd give it." The words came out heavy and cracked, but real. We didn't leave lighter that day, but we left clearer, and that was a kind of progress. A few weeks later, my parents found a small rental near Wright Park in Tacoma. The place was modest. 2 bedrooms, faded hardwood floors, a porch that leaned a little. But it was theirs, paid from their own account, no strings attached. They sold the old house and used part of the proceeds to clear lingering debts. I helped them carry boxes, not out of obligation but choice. When Mom placed the last one in the car, she turned to me and said, "We should have said thank you sooner." I squeezed her hand and replied, "I should have said no sooner." Both can be true. Daniel kept his word. He'd taken a job at a logistics company near Soto and was actually sticking with it. Each month, $600 appeared in my account labeled Repay Heart. At first, I thought he'd quit after 2 payments, but he didn't. He started making them early, with small notes attached. Second shifts killing me or promotion next quarter, maybe. Oliver tracked everything on a spreadsheet, neat as ever, while Andrea officially closed the family file. By summer, my parents had fully settled into their new routine. They canceled the lake timeshare, freeing themselves from its $1,200 annual dues. Dad volunteered at a local community garden. Mom joined a book club at the library. They sounded different when we talked, less anxious, less defensive, more free. As for me, I kept my world simple. I ran around Green Lake 3 mornings a week, headphones in, fog rising off the water, like breath. I cooked again, real meals, not the tired takeout I'd lived on for years. I hosted quiet dinners at my house with my best friend, Tessa, who always brought bread that smelled like home. Sometimes, I'd fly to New York for work, walk through Central Park with a warm pretzel in hand, or spend a weekend in London meeting my firm's clients in person. Every time I handed my own card to a hotel clerk, I felt a quiet pride. I'd built all of this myself. Still, healing isn't a straight climb. Sometimes, I'd wake in the middle of the night and wonder if I'd gone too far, if my boundaries had turned into walls. Grace would remind me, walls keep people out. Boundaries teach them how to stay in. It became my mantra. One Sunday afternoon, while watering the lemon tree on my porch, I noticed how tall it had grown. 2 small lemons clung to the branch, fragile but alive. For some reason, I thought about my family then, still imperfect, still trying but growing. By August, the repayments had reached $3,000. A small, steady proof that change could hold. When Daniel came over for dinner one evening, he brought coffee beans from a new roaster and talked about saving for his own place. His shoulders didn't carry that old arrogance anymore. Just a kind of quiet effort. Mom called a few days later, her voice lighter than I'd heard in years. "We've been talking about starting therapy on our own," she said. "Just us. Without you." I smiled at the thought. It meant they no longer needed me to hold their hands through every fire. It wasn't perfection, but it was progress. And, for the first time, that was enough. Then came the test. It was late August, a warm Sunday evening. I'd just finished dinner and was cleaning up when my phone rang, Daniel's name flashing across the screen. I didn't answer right away. Then it rang again. And again. A text followed. "Emergency. Call me now." The words made my chest tighten. Old instincts flared. Drop everything. Fix it, make it right. But I stopped myself. I looked around my kitchen, the calm light, the clean counters, the small bowl of lemons, and took a breath. Boundaries aren't built for peace alone. They're built for moments exactly like this. I picked up the phone, heart steady. "Hey, Daniel," I said. "I saw your message. Tell me what's going on." His voice shook. "My car broke down on the I-5. I don't know what to do." A year ago, I would have driven straight there, paid for the tow, and covered the repair. Now, I listened carefully, then said, "Okay, here's what we'll do. Call roadside assistance. You have the membership from work, right? Use it. I'll stay on the line until help arrives, but I'm not covering the repair. You can handle that." There was silence, then a soft exhale. "Yeah," he said. "You're right. I can." And he did. When the call ended, I stood in the fading light of my kitchen, phone still in hand, a strange mix of relief and pride washing over me. I hadn't rescued him. I respected him, maybe for the first time. Outside, the sky turned a deep, rich gold. The air smelled of sea salt and rain. I poured myself tea, sat by the window, and watched the lights of the city blink on one by one. My family wasn't perfect. Neither was I. But for once, we weren't pretending. We were just trying, together but separately, each responsible for our own corner of the world. And as I looked at the lemon tree, now steady and thriving, I knew that was enough. Top of form.